Let's talk about J. Kevin for just a second. J. Kevin Butcher helps men and women break free from inner conflict. And he's also the author of Choose and Choose Again, The Brave Act of Returning to God's Love. Can't wait to hear this guy. So let's bring him up with a round of applause. J. Kevin Butcher, everybody. Let's go. Yes.
Put this here. Good morning. So, literally, whenever I give a talk, I think of a talk that I gave some 20 years ago back on 57th Street in New York City. And it was an evening gig. It was right down from Radio City Music Hall. And the guy that, the talk went pretty well, I thought. And the guy that brought me in at the end of the talk came up to me and said, "We'd like to take you out for dinner." And I said, "I'd love it because I'm hungry." And then he said, "But we have one request of you first. One thing we want you to do before we take you out." And I said, "Anything, just ask." He looked me right in the eye and he said, "Before we go out to dinner, I'd like you first to zip up your pants." That is an absolutely true story. I gave that entire talk with my fly completely open. And the irony is, the title of that talk was How to Deal with Shame. I kid you not, that is an absolutely true story. You can't make this stuff up. That's what I'd like to talk to you about just for a few moments this morning is how to deal with shame in the workplace because it is there. First of all, maybe just a definition of shame. Number one, it's different from embarrassment. I mean, everybody gets embarrassed like I did. Hopefully you don't give talks with your fly open, but everybody trips up the stairs. That's just a human emotion. But shame is a deeper feeling of contempt, of self-contempt that many of us carry around with us our entire lives. Some of us are even feeling that feeling this morning beneath all the glitz and all the well-dressedness of our moment and all the speaking and whatever, and all the slide presentation. Some of us are feeling that feeling of self-contempt. It's a feeling that no matter how much we do in life, we're never going to quite measure up. We're never going to quite be what everybody else expects us to be or that we think we need to be. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt is about what we do. Guilt can be forgiven. Shame is more about who we are. What do you do with shame when you feel like you're just not the right person? You were born a wrong person. It makes you feel like you have to cease to exist. It makes you feel like you have to live life hiding behind a facade or behind a mask. Shame is the opposite of what many of us felt when we watched Mr. Rogers years ago. Or maybe I'm dating myself. Maybe you've never seen Mr. Rogers, but I used to watch him, and he would share that song, that wonderful song, "It's You I Like." It's not your diplomas. They're just beside you. It's you I like, every part of you. Shame is the opposite of that feeling, which we all want, to be accepted and loved and appreciated just for who we are. My experience is, in my 64 years on the planet, is that shame, and there's multiple pieces of data to prove this, shame permeates Western culture. So, for example, just a few years ago, the Atlantic Monthly magazine didn't just do an article on shame. They devoted an entire magazine to shame and concluded at the end of the magazine that shame was the most prevalent negative emotion in Western culture today, in the late modern, early postmodern world. Of course, many of you know Brene Brown, who did a TED Talk just a few years ago on, shame. It went viral. Why? Probably because so many of us tapped into her message. So many of us are feeling what we don't want to admit, feeling that feeling of self-contempt that will never really measure up. And then she went on to write a book called Daring Greatly, which, of course, had a huge section in it about shame because, in her view, my view as well, if you don't deal with shame, you're never going to dare greatly. And, of course, Hollywood is also tapping into this culture-wide phenomenon called shame. A movie that you may have seen just came out recently called The Greatest Showman, starring Hugh Jackman, and loosely based upon the life of P.T. Barnum, who took a group of marginalized human beings because of their differences from what people might have thought was normal culture, and basically exploited them to make money. And as the story goes in the movie, he wanted to make money off of them, and so he put them out in front, but he didn't want them to be anywhere near him when he was with respectable people. And of course, the famous song that's already won a Golden Globe is called "This Is Me." And the famous lyric on shame to that song is, "I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. No one, run away, they say, because no one will love you just because of who you are." Fascinating, when I watched the song on YouTube, and you go to the comments underneath, one woman commented like this. She said, "I love the song, 'This Is Me,' because this is me. And then I could just say a word about my own journey. I was successful academically growing up, all the way through grad school. I was successful athletically, always won awards, became a small college football All-American, and was really doing well in my career at the age of 36, but didn't realize the accomplishments that I had gained for myself really didn't fix me or fill me up on the inside. And so I was a very successful, shame-based person, but really didn't know it. So at the end, I remember that night, 1990, at the end of yet another successful performance, trying to maybe get the appreciation that I couldn't give myself on the inside. Coming back from the north side of Detroit, a first-ring suburb, driving back on 94 and Allard on the east side, I came within a gnat's eyelash of taking my own life. I had everything, but inside I had nothing because I was so filled with shame. That was a turning point for me and put me on the trajectory to find out how I could appreciate who I really was and not be run by and eventually killed by those feelings of shame that are killing so many of us every day of our lives. So you might say, how does shame impact the business community? Well, if it's really true that people in culture are dealing with shame, guess who's working for us? Guess who's working with us? Guess who our bosses are? Guess who are those who we supervise? Folk who are dealing with shame. And it impacts us especially in the area of relationships. Because who we are on the inside, more than anything that's going on the outside, impacts how we deal with conflict. So just for example, the Me Too movement, as I'm sure so many of you are aware of, finally has outed what many of us know has been going on in business culture for years and years, and that is that men who are jacked up on the inside have been disrespecting women. And, you know, men, I am a guy. I've been a guy all my life, and so I know how guys operate. And they'll try to say, well, it was because of this, it was because of that. Always trying to blame some external circumstance. It's never about what's out there. It's always about what's in here. So if you're a shame-based person, you're going to tend to treat others, especially in times of conflict, with a lot of shame. If you're jacked up in here, if you have a hate-filled, self-critical message that's going on in your mind every day, you're going to be likely to be taking that out on the people in the workplace that you're trying to do business with and do business for. And of course, some of you know this already better than I do, but I heard a speaker say recently that that kind of unresolved conflict that I believe comes always from what's going on in here, not what's going on out there, has cost American businesses per annum somewhere around $360 billion. Take care of the shame, take care of the conflict, take care of your bottom line. And so it seems to me that historically we might be able to see some kind of pattern about businesses who are on point, realizing that people bring to work what's going on in here, and this is how they act. This is how they contribute to the company or don't contribute to the company. Seems to me that businesses that are on point would be creating space for their workplace to deal with what's going on inside a human being. So for example, maybe an older example, but it still hits us in a contemporary way. How many of you have had a Guinness recently? Maybe not. If you haven't, you should try one. They're very, very good. Arthur Guinness, 18th century, built his first brewery in Dublin. But he didn't just hire folk and then put values on the wall and put a list of, what should be done, what we should be doing to make a bottom line profit. He took a look at his workforce and said, what's going on in the external of these folks? What are their lives about, and how does that impact what's going on inside them? And so Arthur Guinness had the forthrightness and the vision to create, he literally built an entire community for folks to live in because they had poor living conditions, they didn't even have clean drinking water, so he built a whole community where they could move, and then he also had the wisdom to build a cultural center so they could go and take care of their inner life, they could take classes, they could do the arts, they could get counseling, they could take care of their inner world, and as a result, and that value, by the way, has followed Guinness all the way up until this day, as a result, Guinness became not only one of the most popular and well-managed breweries in that area of Europe in that day, but they also became, bottom line, most profitable, and it also became a place where everyone wanted to work. Everyone wanted to work at Guinness. And if you go online today and see what people say about Guinness, it's still a place, because that value is still in the Guinness family, to take care of the inner life of their employees. It's still today one of the most popular places to work in the world. You say, well, give me something a little bit closer to home. Try this one on for size. Most of us know that the New England Patriots are one of the most successful football franchises in NFL history. What many of us don't know is that in 2013, they were starting to implode from the inside out. because they had a football player, very famous football player, really good football player, who got accused of murder. And he was convicted of murder. And apparently it sent a shockwave through the locker room. Apparently the guys were just literally a mess on the inside. So they had the wisdom and the foresight to hire. You're not going to believe this. I couldn't believe it until I read it the other day in USA Today. They had the wisdom and the foresight to hire in 2013 someone they call a character coach, a guy named Jack Easterby, who his entire job is to take care of the inner life of these football players, so that by the time they get to the practice field, by the time they get to the game field, they can do what their skills would allow them to do for the bottom line profit and success of the company. And you know the rest of the story. They have continued since that day, not to implode, but I think largely as a result of the work of Jack Easterby, who is hired by the New England Patriots to take care of, shall we say, shame-based thinking in a lot of these football players. They have continued to become one of the most successful franchises in NFL history. So what might we take away from this today if, for our business, whatever it is that you do in your business or what your discipline is? Well, first of all, I think, personally, we've got to stop relegating the care of the inner life of the people that work with us and for us to the churches and the synagogues and the mosques and the therapist's office and, for heaven's sakes, HR. You have a problem with somebody who's got something jacked up inside, go to HR. It's got to stop, in my opinion, if we want to increase our bottom line. And so here's two suggestions of what you might consider doing in terms of creating an atmosphere in your workplace that are not that hard to do. It'll take some work, but they're really not that hard. And there's monumental results that will come from these two situations. First of all, what would it be like if we created space for folk to come to work and realize they didn't have to hide because of their shame, but they could be honest about who they are and be accepted in their authenticity. Now look, I understand work can't always be group therapy. I understand that there's a bottom line profit margin that has to be accomplished or we don't have a job to worry about. But what would it be like if folk knew from the top down that in this particular company they're working for, there are spaces, there are places, in fact, even amongst the employees, there's a value that is carried that you can take some moments and be who you really are. Take off your mask, be who you really are, and receive acceptance for where you are truly, not what you're trying to hide behind. So one of the things that we do with groups that we work with, it's an amazing thing to watch. We do this thing called the mask exercise. It's very simple, costs no money at all. You give everyone a mask just like this that is no writing on either side. And on the outside of the mask, what you might say is what they're trying to project to people. They would write down what they're trying to get people to think about them, usually because they're too ashamed of what's going on in their real lives. On the inside, you ask them to have as much courage as they can to write down what's really going on. And then you have them share their mask. So I'm going to just share my mask with you this morning. It's really not fair because you don't have to share your mask with me, but maybe we can do that later over lunch. On the outside of my mask, this is what I would like you to think about me this morning. I'd like you to think that I'm tireless, that I'm fearless, that I'm a little older, but I'm still pretty cool. I'm the dad of the year and the grandfather of the year. I'm on point with my life goals and objectives. I never doubt myself. I have a perfect marriage. Even arguments with my wife, Carla, end with, oh, you were right all the time, and a glass of wine. That's what I want you to believe about me. And there's more. If we had time, there's much more. But this is more what's really going on inside me that I carry around with me many days that is in need of healing if I'm going to be the productive member of culture and society that I'm created to be. After 40 years of marriage, Carla and I are still trying to figure out how not to fight so intensely. I cry almost every day about the pain I see around me in Detroit, where I work, and in our world. Sometimes I doubt my effectiveness. I think I swear too much. My wife tells me I swear too much. I worry about my wife's cancer returning almost every day. I miss my kids, and I miss my grandkids so much, and I worry almost every day that something might happen. They live far away from us, that would take them from me and take them from us, that I couldn't do anything about it. If I let myself, I think I could abuse alcohol. I don't let myself, but I think if I did, I could. When you do this exercise in a controlled environment and atmosphere, it is amazing to watch what happens. It's almost like you can see the word healing pasted around, around the walls, because you see people start to heal and open up. You see them, first of all, say, wait a minute. I thought I was the only one that felt these things. I thought I was the only one that carried this baggage with me to work every day. And they find out, no, it's not just you, it's someone else that feels the same way. Secondly, deep down inside, they realize that they're accepted where they are, right where they are. They're accepted. One last thing. I think I'm the first person that got the buzzer. So I'm the sacrificial lamb for the rest of you. The first three got a pass. Secondly, what if it wasn't just about acceptance or being authentic? What if it was about being affirmed? Neurobiologists tell us that if our brains literally don't get enough love and enough affirmation in life, this is a neurobiological fact, that a part of our brain, the limbic brain, gets damaged, and it impacts how we deal with life. They also say that part of the brain, the emotional brain, the limbic brain, can be repaired by the opposite of what causes the damage to begin with. So, what causes the damage? Unlove, lack of affirmation. What brings repair? Love and affirmation. What if you created space in your workplace where people can come in and not just be accepted but for being who they truly are, but be affirmed? One last story. Quite a few years back, I was asked to go see a guy in prison, a guy that was all jacked up, and I mean tatted up. He had manacles on his hands and on his wrists. An angry guy committed a very, very violent crime. And I was there to try to help him in some way. I wasn't getting through to him. I was about ready to walk out, and then I looked at him one last time, and something hit me. Not that approved of his crime, but something hit me about his humanity. I looked at him, and some compassion came to me, and I literally did. I got up around the desk, went around, put my arms around this guy in manacles, pulled him close like he was a brother, kissed him on the cheek. I did. I kissed him on the cheek like he was a brother. I whispered in the ear of this felon like he was a brother, I love you, man, and I wish you'd let me come see you again. And then he mumbled something, went back to his cell. I went outside in the parking lot and kicked the living daylights out of myself. Why didn't you just tell him you'll see him sometime in prison and you'll send him a card? Said I have to be hugging and kissing on his brother. And so he went back in his cell, and this is what he said, this hardened criminal. He said, what just happened to me? I've never felt anything like that. I'm 45 years old. I've never felt anything like that in my life. Whatever it was, I've got to have a whole lot more of it. I started following him through his prison sentence. Some other folk came around him. This hardened felon, violent felon, went through 18 years of prison without one major ticket, came out and became a productive member of society. Love heals the woundedness of unlove that causes so much shame that locks us down. What if you created space in your workplace for people to be authentic, to be accepted, and to be affirmed? You might not only increase your bottom line, you might make a dent in the wound in our very, very hurting world. Thank you so much.